Have an officer take it up there. Oh no, send a cop. It's more fun. Send a cop. Biggest one on the force. Wouldn't bother you so much.
I wondered why. I thought he was just hypersensitive to the, because there are those people and you have to give them their space. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
We are expecting at least one more planning commissioner that'll be joining us. So again, thanks everybody for being here. We're going to go ahead and move right into the working agenda under item 2A1, discussion on the PD zone. Brock, are you leading that or is Bob?
Well, I can get the introduction into this and then turn it over to Bob or maybe Miss Mathis. So here on the PD zone, we've had some projects come in recently and that have gone through this zone, and we wanted to make sure that we were on the same page as we've looked at some of the things that are coming in might not be quite everyone up to speed on what the code says. So the PDR in 17.68.060, the Plan Development Residential District, that's the one that will that. And then I think in the packet that went out, when I scanned the documents, I thought it had all the documents in there, but I think there was a couple missing. Also the 17.68.100 and then 105. So, and there were some concerns Ms. Mathis had brought to our attention within that and some of the projects. And so wanted to make sure that as these projects come through that we're all on the same page with Planning Commission and City Council of what is in the code, what we expect. And then as we go through it to decide if what's in there, is that what we want, or is there things that need to be adjusted and changed to the way development and things that are happening here in Santa Clara over the last little while and going forward. So with that, if Bob has anything to add, if not, then after that, we'll just turn it to council and planning commission for discussion.
Well, just a couple of quick comments, maybe. First, I think this is a great idea to get the planning commission and the council together and talk about the codes, make sure that they're current, and also that we're all just interpreting the code provisions in the same way. And so there's some concerns, I guess, about the Regal Homes project that came to the Planning Commission, but has not come to the council yet, and that's because the development agreement has not been approved. And in hindsight, maybe the planning commission shouldn't have proceeded with it because the development agreement, we all thought it was going to be approved fairly or come through. And that many months have gone by and it hasn't happened. So anyway, the planning commission made recommendations on open space transfers and maybe density transfer that was in the draft development agreement, but hasn't been finalized. And so anyway, that's at the time the developer was pushing, and I think the city generally tries to be accommodating. And so I think the sense from everybody was, let's take to the planning commission and proceed with the public hearing and so forth. Anyway, there's a provision to me, I guess, see the 200 unit rental project as an apartment project. I think an apartment is something different than individual detached homes. And I wrote a memo, put some definitions that were on the internet about what is an apartment considered. Usually it's a big building with multiple rental units. So another thing, there is under the density bonus provisions, a number of design criteria. The last one listed in that is, it says an apartment unit or apartment project should not have more than 30 units. And I think the idea behind that was that we didn't want a really large building in Santa Clara that would be a little out of scale with the community. So it was kind of the 30 unit limit was, I think, a size limitation on that building rather than how many people might occupy it or occupancy or something like that. So anyway, those a couple of provisions. And also because this is in a PDR zone, the city has latitude, and as Matt advises on numerous occasions, PDR zone, because it's a legislative act, the city has broad discretion to approve or not approve a PDR project. And so if the city thinks it's something's too big, too dense, too whatever, and can justify it, then you have grounds to deny it. It's a zone change. So I don't think we have to fall back on something, a particular provision if we think it's too big, if we think it's too dense, whatever. But one of the things the Regal Homes has pitched the city on is that this was a workforce housing or an attainable housing type development, that this would provide housing for teachers and others, peoples in the community. And that's something I think the city has recognized as a real issue. So anyway, at this point, I don't have a lot of other comments. I wrote a brief memo. Some of you may have seen it, others may not, but anyway, questions, I guess.
All right, thank you. All right, I guess we will turn that over to council and planning commission for discussion.
I know Matt weighed in when Lena brought it to my attention. I discussed it with Brock and asked Matt to address it. And Matt replied back that he didn't feel like the Regal Homes was necessary in violation of the ordinance, that the way that the project had been designed with the single level detached units, the detached living units, that it didn't necessarily meet that definition, similar to the reasoning that Bob just presented. But I wanted to make sure we addressed the concerns Lena brought up after that council meeting, and kind of get everybody's feedback on what they think. There is that provision in there that limits like an apartment building to no more than 30 units, or an apartment project to no more than 30 units. But in my mind, I kind of agree with Bob. That's a massing type decision, like a 3-story. building was surrounded by parking lot, that typical thing of an apartment. When you think apartment building, that's kind of what comes to my mind, is multi-story with a lot of them in one place, possibly an amenity or something like that that goes along with it. And I think back when that limitation was put in, we were hoping that those would be spread. The reason to limit it was 30 in any one is that you would have, not to necessarily limit them altogether, but you would limit them in a particular area so that they could be located in other areas of the city. And that's why you see those small medium density pods on the general plan, was kind of thinking that you could maybe have those spread out through the city. So they didn't necessarily impact one neighborhood too negatively or over another one, so that they were kind of spread out through there. And you provided that opportunity for the workforce housing, for people on, fixed income housing, that type of deal, to still be able to live in Santa Clara, not force them out of the community altogether. And they could still live here, but you wouldn't concentrate them in one specific place. But that's why we're here. Let's hear some feedback. What everybody thinks. Lena?
Actually, I can tell you, I've had a couple of residents contact me recently. And I really want to try and stay away from particular projects and just talk about residents and what they want, because I think it's safer that way. They contacted me specifically because of a project in town and thought the use we had approved was one way, and now it's being used very differently than what they anticipated. And so their comments to me, and I could read you what they texted, but their comments were, how is the city approving something like this, approving projects where they aren't meeting the limitation? Why are we allowing such large projects that are just rental based? We thought we didn't want large rental projects within the city. And so I think maybe some of it's just semantics with the term apartment versus large areas of mass that have just rental projects per se. And I, to some degree, I guess I agree with that, knowing that that our residents don't want large rental projects. They're okay with rentals, and they're okay with them being dispersed in various places. And I think for affordable housing reasons, we need to have them. I think we need all those different types of housings, but I probably agree with them a little bit that we don't necessarily, at least they don't want huge projects that are just big, large rental projects. And I don't know, for me, I don't know that the structure itself makes a difference. I mean, when I was in college, I looked at they were called apartments in Utah County. They were townhomes. They were student housing apartments, but they were townhomes. My son, when he lived in Cedar, he lived in a basement apartment. It was a single family home, but it was a basement apartment. So for me, the physical structure of what it looks like doesn't dictate to me that it's an apartment or not an apartment. For me, it's more generally, is it being rented or not rented? Kind of gives more of that connotation, I guess. So they thought.
Anybody else?
Are we, the projects that have the nightly rental overlay but have individual ownership, are they considered different from this discussion on that?
Yeah, I think the short-term rental with the overlay on the short-term rental,
Yeah.
I think and Bob jumped in here, I think that kind of sets a different use, because that's a short-term rental. That's obviously going to have a turnover, but that's probably a different impact on a neighborhood or on the community than a long-term apartment.
And I think my question regarding that is, when we talk to 30, because I would interpret it similar to the way it was, obviously I think the limit, I would interpret the limitation to 30 as discussion of buildings. I could see not wanting, we're doing plumbing across town on one that's, 120 4-story apartments, one building.
Mm-hmm.
And, so if on how that would look, would a project within, if we're looking at if it's not specific to a building, we're looking at total 30 rental units, would we then need to turn around and look at the nightly rental projects, even though they're individually owned? They're still, again, different for the fact that they've got amenities and things like that. But I would imagine the apartments, even a rental project similar to what we've looked at, would have amenities in that. So I don't know. If we look at it specific to one, does the other come into effect as well, and size of them and everything else?
I know that a lot of those are individually platted for sale. They can be owner occupied as easy as they can be rented. And we don't have any limitation that I'm aware of on renting a owned unit. If I own the unit, I can rent the unit. There's no ordinance or limitation that I'm aware of in the city that limits anybody. If you own the unit, you can rent it. Just like a single family home.
My question is,
Sure.
Love it.
I don't quite understand the 30 limitation. In density, do we have a zone that allows 30 units per acre?
Well, this isn't on 1 acre. This is
I know, I
project.
understand that. That's what but what I'm saying is, I've never seen a building of 30 units that, I mean, you could fit 30 units on an acre. Isn't our density, Lena, isn't our density already in place? So that can't particularly happen, or are we just talking about a project of 30 units?
You can have a 30-unit building without having that, even if you put it on a 7.5-acre lot, that would be 4 units per acre.
Right, okay, and so we're talking about a building rather than a density. So if a building has 30 units, your densities would still apply. And it would just be, I mean, like we do open space, if they've got 4 acres and they're going to use 2 acres for open space, they fit the density for, 4 times 18, whatever you want to call it. But
Yeah, the text, it's on the last page,
Page,
the last paragraph of that text. They wanted apartment projects to be smaller in size and dispersed rather than have large projects or apartment projects concentrated in close proximity to other apartment projects. So trying to, I think, the pure apartment building, trying to limit the number of those in any one particular spot, so they could be dispersed. But yeah, the PD zone, if you got a big enough piece, the 30 units it's not a density issue.
No, it's not a
just
density.
that massing issue.
And so we're just talking about a building that has more than 30, we are not really
And
high on.
I looked in our ordinance to see if we defined what an apartment was, and we don't define it. There isn't any definition of an apartment. I actually checked St. George's as well, and they don't define it in their municipal code either. So.
I noticed Ben Shakespeare made some comments, and I thought I should have a rebuttal for him, but I don't. But I think that this really comes down to a couple of key issues. One of them is that when we make land use decisions, sometimes our judgment is confused because we already have a house here, we already live here, and our constituents sometimes have trouble with that issue also because, I've got that guy across the street. He's an older gentleman. He's rich. He doesn't want a bunch of who knows what moving in there. And then we have some conflict about rentals. Everybody I know rented. Everybody was a renter that I know. It's interesting. I just was up at the Utah League of Cities and Towns. The population of Utah's expected to double by 2050. So I was in Salt Lake City this weekend, and just as I drove around Salt Lake City, I went to Daybreak and I went to a bunch of different areas. And just thinking about twice as many people in Salt Lake City in 30 years as we have now. And it sounds kind of fantastic, but 30 years ago, I'd just gotten off my mission. I lived in Provo 30 years ago. So I mean, it's not like it'll never happen. So I think that we have to make a decision as a city about what we want to do. Do we want to just have single family homes on quarter acre lots for the next 30 or 50 years? And when, not if, but when Utah grows, that growth will just have to be in Milford or somewhere else. Or if we're going to just kind of embrace that and say, yeah, we can deal with a little density, and there'll be rentals, and there'll be an apartment complex, and there'll be some 3-story townhouses, and we're all okay with that. Or if we just say we just want everybody to live in a house like Ben Shakespeare's on 4 acres, then we roll with that. Well, maybe not as nice as yours, Ben's. Not as nice as your house, but you know what I'm saying. Big gates, the whole enchilada. But I just think that those are the things that's like, whether this has 30 or 29 units or whatever, that's not the issue. The issue is, how do we feel about rentals in our community, and how do we feel? I mean, I think about it. I'm in 30 years, I'm going to be old. I'm going to be in my 80s. I'm going to want somebody to be able to live in Santa Clara that can come over and help me mow my lawn, help me take out my garbage, paint, change the light bulbs. I may need some health care. The way it is right now, you can't even buy a home in Santa Clara for $400,000. Who can afford a $400,000 house? You have to make $100,000 a year. Nobody's going to be able to live here. I'm not going to be able to get anybody to help me.
Well, the reality is the demographics changing. There's a lot of people, and I have employees that have no desire for home ownership. They're content renting. They're content. They don't want to take care of yard. They don't want to raise it. They don't want to, they want to have their weekends where they can go. And so there is and I think the numbers show that. So there is a need for apartments, for whatever rentals as you call. So we have to look at this and go, what is the answer? What is the
Well, and
solution?
one thing
Right, what do we want?
about rentals is that people often think of rentals like me and my kids, all living out there and crap all out in the yard and stuff. But my favorite renter is Tim Cook, who's the CEO of Apple. So when we say, well, gee, we don't want renters living around here, the dude's worth whatever $1 billion, but he rents. To your point.
Rick Majerus.
Well, and I
rented the
think the
entire
issue
time.
is the issue rentals or affordable housing?
Well, not.
I mean, to me, it would be nice if, for example, we could enlist the federal government in this process, and instead of looking for an RP&P, we get ground from them that we can own by the city and make it available to a developer at zero cost. Then you've got affordable housing. You're not going to control the market by densities. You look at what they've been building in St. George and Washington. The starting price on those units over in Washington is $1,400 a unit. I don't know about your employee, but my employees couldn't afford a $1,400 a unit apartment complex any more than they could a $1,400 home. And so, to me, affordable housing is costs, and what can we do to help the costs?
My opinion has evolved over the years. I remember back when we were working with the city, trying to figure out if we had enough water not to be in the pool. And we calculated the amount without the South Hills, assuming it didn't go, that we could probably find enough water if we had reuse and all that without going to the pool. And I remember after one of the meetings with Ron Thompson, and he said to me, he says, how do you figure you have enough water? And I said, well, the residential density in Santa Clara is this, and based on the little conservation, we got enough water. And he goes, oh, you're short-sighted. He goes, you're going to go up. And I thought, he's out to lunch. And I still sort of think he is. But in the last few years, you mentioned the Washington. I mean, that's where I work, is over in Washington. And things are going up like crazy. And in St. George, things are going up. And I just think I think it's almost inevitable if we're not going to just die on the vine, we're going to have to do something to adapt, although I may not like it. But the other thing, and it sort of sticks to my craw just a little bit, I understand the attitude of not wanting, and I'll use the term that was used to me one night as we had approved something, and I got a call that night, and it was, we don't want those people here, and I have a hard time with that because, like James said, we've all been those people, and we've all rented, and I have a hard time just closing the door on a good affordable rental because of that.
Well, bottom line is if we don't take the lead, our federal government will. And that's just,
They'll come down with it.
and I don't agree at all with reaching out for federal funds, because that's going to come out with an absolute handcuff on exactly what we can and can't do. And
No, he just wants the South Hill.
yeah, but
All I want's the property. I don't.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
the point is that we
I'm with you.
we can say, hey, we would love R110 all the way through this. That's not that. The reality is that is simply not going to happen, because you watch all the legislation that's been heading and you can follow it, and it's only a matter of time that if we don't do it, we'll be mandated to do it. So we're going to have to find ways to do it. Our ADUs, our accessory dwellings are really, I mean, for our type of community, are, in my opinion, the absolute best, because you have owner occupied that you can rent. If you're the one paying the mortgage, you're generally not going to charge your good friend full market value of $1,400 for a studio. You're gonna get the right person there. But specific to this and what we like, and again, we're gonna have rentals. The reality is there's people out there and that are going to be 100% against it. And
Well, I certainly
just
think we
gotta
need
stand.
rentals. It's affordable rentals is what
but again, if your house is 400,000, you're not paying a $1,400 a month mortgage. And so when that was my thing when I went to the housing coalition, and they were basing everything off a 6% interest rate, and it was like, well, I can go get a rate today at 2.5. Let's adjust to what, okay, interest rates are, then we need to teach good finance and credit and how to build your credit. And because that makes a big difference, a 6% rate and a 2.5% rate in a mortgage. And so, but you're right.
I think we've made adjustments. I think Bob's coming in line with what the state mandate's been for us and the things that we've done to make those adjustments. I think we're getting there. I don't know. I don't know how to bring the cost of land down. How do you bring the cost of land down?
That's the big problem.
You'd cut off the water to it. It's cheap then. When there's no water to it, it's really cheap.
Tuscany up on 400 East and Ivans from the residents. But Tuscany was the first thing out there that there wasn't a resident within 1,000 feet of it when it was built. So when it went through the zone change, there was nothing there.
Yeah.
Because my thing is, it's not really a definition issue. Like, to me, those are apartments. I know we categorize them as townhomes.
Mhm.
Is there really a difference?
Well, it's a for sale unit. So
but kind of looking
Well, let me lay this on you. In my house, I have neighbors. How many neighbors do I have within what I would call a complex? 50% of the house is adjacent to mine. So if you go 3 houses each way on both sides of the street, more than half are rentals. In those rentals, there are multiple families in each one. So do I live in an apartment complex? If you ask my neighbor, if you ask Frank, heck yeah, we live in an apartment complex, and he'll come right out and put his finger on your chest when he says it. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to ask her, because then you get an apartment complex with a freeway down the middle of it. But I mean, are they having negative impacts on the neighborhood? Yeah, they don't take care of the yard as well as she does. And I said I gave her the full recognition for my yard because I don't do nothing with it. And you can go in the Heights, and I'll bet I can go out in the Heights and I can find areas where I pick 8 homes linearly, and you'll have 70 or 80% of those will be rentals. Is that an apartment complex?
Well, and then we have those that are renting bedrooms within
The rentals.
the rental.
So
And so
it's the apartment. I think that's probably why it's not in the code. They're out there, and depending on your perspective, they're good or bad. But the style of the housing doesn't have an impact on whether it's a rental.
I guess the point is, if we're fine with Tuscany and Pioneer Crossing, why don't we just let the density bonus and staff kind of regulate it? They're just have faith, they're not gonna make poor decisions, and what they recommend, and as long as it gives them a density bonus.
A lot of planners have talked to me as we went through Vision Dixie and we went through general plan updates, and a lot of the planning input, the quality of the design was more important than necessarily the density. That you could have density if the quality of the design that went into the project was there, if the building exteriors and the quality materials and the available open space for recreation and amenities inside the project, of the parking, the way you dealt with solid waste, all of that things bleed in. And if you control that, the density was less of an impact if all of those issues were checked. And I kind of believe that way. That's why I don't think we really see a lot of issues in some of our townhome, or particularly in the short-term rental projects. Short-term rental projects, to get that conditional use permit, the quality of the design is elevated. And if you look at all those projects, and I wish I don't have a police person here, but the last time they reported, we were still the calls, police calls, conflicts and disputes inside those projects was nothing. Impacts on the community. I haven't heard a negative impact from one of those projects on the community itself. I think the key to it is they're contained, that they're all the same, and that the quality of the design that went into the project is elevated. And maybe that's what we need to be looking at, is not so much, is it a for rent product? Is it a townhome that could be rented? But is the quality there so that when it is built, and is the management there, that it can be maintained properly? Is the HOA strong enough, and those types of things, that you maintain that quality and minimize the impact to the adjacent areas?
I agree with you, Mayor. You're right.
So the trick is if we got that in the ordinance now, do we need to tweak the ordinance to add some more requirements in there? Where do we go? We haven't got what I call a problem area yet. We've got density. A lot of the projects have coming in, got the bonus density. So we got densities approaching 12. They can't go more than 12. So they still, even to do an apartment building, they would have to have the open space to offset it, or the low density component within the project to offset it. We may see that with Black Desert on a bigger scale than what we're seeing now. If Black Desert ever decides to pursue their PD zone, which you kind of got to think they have to, you may see that open space component offset some density in some of those pods out there.
And they're going to have to because of their agreement. I mean, they're only developing 40% of that area. So they're limited to, and in order to make it pencil law, you're going to have to cluster things and get those bonuses and offset them. I don't, so then it comes down to, here's the question, because, and I see both. I look at Heritage Point here, and I know this just because one of our employees is getting a couple, they're sold out. They haven't even broke ground and they're sold out. And then they've got a huge waiting list behind that. There's a gigantic need for that. And so then it comes down to the balance of, you take all the developable ground that's left up on the heights and then what's coming out here, and there's going to be a huge push for more townhomes and more density, and then drawing the line going, okay, is it a 60-40, 70-30? How do we develop to still get residential communities and still have some density and juggle? Because I agree. I think overall, I mean, yeah, there's those that would just love farms and gardens and acre lots or half acre, and it's just not the reality. Land's just too expensive. And so then how do you juggle that to get 60 units of single family homes and then 30 units of townhomes?
The Solace project kind of did that.
Yeah.
Where they came in with the 120 single family lots, 7 to 11, 12,000 square foot that in today's market are going to sell for 150 plus.
Yeah.
And
he's probably all reserved on.
Yeah, and he's
knowing the market.
Exactly. I mean, so that is not going to hit any of your affordable housing targets. But at the same time, you got 80 townhomes.
Yeah.
80 townhomes in that same thing that will be closer to hitting that market. They'll probably be purchased by investors, either a starter home buyer, somebody who's wanting to get in, may be able to afford it or upgrade to it. And then you'll have investors that'll buy the others, and then they'll become rentals. And the rental market is super strong. I know Kent Fry just rented one of his units down by the college. And how old are those units? Danny, 30 years? 35, 40-year-old unit. He's getting $1,300.
Yeah.
For a unit that is right across the street from the college. That's a college housing apartment. They're getting $1,300 a month.
That project you just referenced, when it came personally for me, I loved it. I love that we had a very large single family outlay with some density in there that did, because I think overall that was the intent when you get this stability of this big neighborhood and knowing that, hey, there's going to be a rental component to, even though they're individually owned, a lot of those are going to be rented. And by doing that, you limit the big projects. Those big projects, I think all of us are a little bit nervous on those. They'll just all apartments, you start spreading them out through the community. So that was kind of where I was going. Is I love when that came through. I thought this was a really well thought out that kind of hits the mark for both of those. And yet there's going to be those in the community that aren't happy.
They're not going to be,
and then they won't be. But they're not the ones reading the mandates coming down and the legislation that's out there and the limitations that the cities are fighting.
I sent the council that hack meeting last week. Was anybody able to watch it? If you weren't able to, I think it's recorded and we can probably get it for you. the housing types that they went through in the hack. It was a presentation by a couple of architects in Salt Lake that are dealing with trying to make things more attainable. But it had all the different product types that you can get there with. The stuff I haven't heard for a long time, duplexes and triplexes and stacked flats and stacked duplexes and
Cottage.
stacked triflexes and sixplexes and cottage development and tiny homes. It was all, and they all look pretty good. And there's I laugh about tiny homes, but there's a tiny home community approved by the city of St. George, zoning approved down in Green Valley. It's going to be really interesting to watch it come out of the ground and how it's received. But it's a pure tiny home, just like you see on TV right down in Green Valley. And so it'll be interesting to see, nestled in a bunch of apartments and some townhomes and some single family, all within the same zone change. But the committee was really pushing that, trying to find housing for, to meet the needs of the community. And so I'll forward the next meeting. They were excited to see some Santa Clara people on there in that meeting. It's probably the ones you've been to in the past. So.
Well, I have a thought. I don't know who had the foresight to write our short-term rental ordinance, but I think it's wonderful. And in comparison to a lot of cities that don't have that in place, we did really good. My thought is if we have maybe some projects that come in that are strictly large rental communities, I'm going to call it that, particularly because we have two presently. One wasn't proposed that way, but that's how it's going. Maybe we ought to look at writing some provisions similar to our short-term rental ordinance that's specific to projects that are strictly large rental, long-term rental projects, just like we have short-term rental projects. So that if you have a project come in and it's 185 units and it's a rental master planned community, that we have some requirements in place that we can take care of make sure that it's locally managed, it's on-site management, it's to address some of the issues and the concerns that the residents obviously have with some of those. Would be a suggestion.
Well, that's really important, because what happens is when they show up here and we don't like their project, like say they want to put a trailer, what do you call it? A trailer park in there.
RV, yeah.
No, I'm not even talking about RVs. I'm talking about a bunch of single
Regular
wide.
trailer, mobile
Yeah,
home.
Mobile homes. Yeah. Yeah, tiny homes. Tiny homes, as Ben calls them. But people come in here and they want approval for something. If we already have it in place, they have to play by those rules. If we say, yeah, we don't really like Ben Shakespeare's idea, we'll try to throw some obstacles for him. Council or legal counsels told us that's against the law and we're going to have a bunch of trouble if we do that. So what you're saying is really important, that we preempt that instead of try to respond to somebody's wacky idea when they get in here.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, I think I'm hearing the same thing Lena is hearing from residents, that like they've asked about certain projects that are going in, and then is it going to be rentals? And there's kind of a sigh afterwards when I say yes. And so, but then at the same time, I've seen we have townhomes in our community that have all turned into rentals over time, and the residents aren't complaining about those. So I think that's just more of an education thing for our community. But I do also get a lot of concern about just big buildings near our neighborhoods. And so I think that's really where I would want this to go in terms of massing and size of buildings. I think we can get over if it's rentals or not with the community. It's going to be hard if I come and tell them you're going to have a three or four story building, a couple streets over from your house. That's probably not going to go over very well. And I do like your idea, Lena, of kind of beefing up our ordinances to kind of give some guidance to developers when they come in. They'd know well, this is kind of what the city wants. Can I actually do that? And I think that could be really good.
Most of them, correct me, Bob, if I'm wrong, but if they go for the 12, whether it's short-term rental or not, a lot of the requirements come in. Now, we've had this discussion before, like regarding amenities. How much amenities do you require? And it's got to be measurable, because St. George, even today, they've tried to do it and they come up with a number. You have to have so many units requires 4 amenities. So many units requires 3. So many units require 5. And this is what you can do in an amenity: pickleball, playground, recreation area, pool, clubhouse, those types of things. But I could build, that clubhouse could be as big as this table, with a pool as big as this table right next to it. There's 2 amenities. There's no definition to what constitutes an amenity. We asked Planning Commission a while back to define amenities.
And the credit and the,
So we
it's just, you look at it and you go,
I think if we're going to do it, because right now a guy can go to 8 units to acre without bonus, and he doesn't have to do the upgrade, right?
Correct. You don't, that except in the short-term rentals, regardless of density, it says that it's this one sentence that says amenities shall be provided commensurate with the size of the project. So, and I think,
And maybe that's where
about as good as you can get.
Well,
Really, I mean, I don't know.
we can do better than that. We can define,
All right.
at least we can define how big a pickleball court is.
Yeah, the pickleball, is-
We
yeah.
can do that.
Is a shooting range an amenity? That qualify?
It is in your neighborhood.
Yeah.
But I think I like the idea, raising the bar, because they all right now require to be walled. That's already in there in the PD. We're requiring similar parking, similar setbacks. If we kind of beef up maybe that open space of that amenity definition, so they know to get to these levels, then maybe we create that same impact in all the projects as what we currently see in the short-term rentals.
James actually hit a nerve when he mentioned trailer parks. I was actually here when Iwan's was just a trailer park.
I lived in that trailer park, so be careful. With a brand new trailer.
And it became a real mess. All the crime was out there, all the drugs were out there. I'm not saying all, but you had a bunch going on out there. And Ivan's has made some changes, and Ivan's is a completely different city than it was 40 years ago.
Still has the trailer park.
Yeah, it does.
Still has the same issues that were there, are still there. They've just buffered it.
But most of them are gone. And when you mention quality, I think that's the key to this whole thing, is we need to make sure we get quality building when it comes into our city. And by defining amenities, maybe this is part of it. But I remember when the Johnsons brought in their fabricated home in Santa Clara. I don't remember the Johnsons up on the Heights.
11 acres.
Yeah, the 11 acres that were for sale, but they had a tennis court out in front.
Oh, yeah.
But
The
they,
Mansell piece, right?
yeah, but they brought a fabricated home, and it
Prefab.
caused a lot of stir because Santa Clara did not allow trailer courts or, mobile homes in the city, and Santa Clara still doesn't.
Well, we don't allow mobile homes, but you can't regulate modular homes.
Right.
As long as they've got the roof pitch.
They build a modular home, and it caused a real stir.
Yeah.
But I think the quality is the important thing that we need to be careful with.
I agree.
Not to set a negative on the quality, because we do want the quality. But every time you add an amenity, you're also adding a cost. And so for them to pencil out having a rental, the more we add the amenities, the higher the costs are going to be. So the affordable housing that we're trying to reach is kind of going, I own a townhome in a 40-unit complex in St. George that has 0 amenities, and I'm still getting $1,100 a month rent. Okay? If I were to have to pay for pool and all that stuff, my rent
going
would
up.
be going lots higher. And so, I mean, we're kind of in a catch 22. Are we talking affordable housing? Are we talking high density?
Remember DAHAC? Remember when you,
Oh, yeah.
Mayor, you sent me to go to all those stupid DAHAC meetings? This is back before the recession, when we had a workforce housing, big time workforce housing issue because we couldn't, they were recruiting large and employer base out in the industrial park and we had no place for people that could go. So they formed this committee, all the cities sent a representative to it, and we talked about it. And then it came down to at the end. I mean, the recession saved us because I didn't have to go to those meetings as soon as the market changed anymore. But it was coming down to almost like rent control, to where if you could come up and design a way to control the return, you could control the price. So we could design a project that could reach the market and get that 40% of AMI could qualify to buy it. But when they left, they could not take advantage of the increase in value that had happened while they were in that home.
They
There was-
shared the profit.
There was a deed restriction that basically said when you leave, that gain, some of that gain goes back into the pool for the next one.
Well, and we had lots in Santa Clara, vacant lots that the city owned that actually the Habitat for Humanity,
Remember that?
we gave them special rates. They came in and built homes that were affordable. People then went in, got their loans and bought the homes. And that created affordable housing. But that was when we were small and we only had, I think, 3 or 4. But you talk about community, nobody wanted the lot next to them to be Habitat for Humanities. And so you're always going to have those negative influences. What we have to do, to me, is decide affordable housing, or what we're doing now going to meet that affordable housing, or is there something else we need to create? And it's like we talked, you can go density higher and it reduces your land costs. But then if I throw in pickleball courts and pools, the amenity costs force those things up. So
I think for the city, based on what the mayor was talking about, I'm thinking about a beautiful, attractive building more than the tennis courts, pickleball courts, and swimming pools. Because that's just what I think. I don't think we have to, for a apartments type thing or some community rentals, as you say, I don't think you have to necessarily predicate what those amenities are or even require them as much as just an attractive building.
And well maintained. The maintenance and the management, I think those are the two critical things. I think if you can keep that building or that complex well managed and well maintained, so the effort you go to on the initial side it's preserved through there, and you're managing your tenants, and you're not having some of the problems that come into the ones that aren't being managed happen there. You're probably not going to have near the impacts on the community as you can minimize those impacts.
So how do you police the CCNRs?
Well, that may be something we have the legal guys look at.
I mean, we have
The rental ordinance that we've talked about where they're registered, and
Yeah.
something we may, beef that side of it up.
Well, I mean, I know CCNRs within the city of Santa Clara that are recorded, but they don't have any meetings
Right.
and they have no way of enforcing. Well, I mean, we have 2-story homes across the street in a subdivision that was not to have 2-story homes across the street, but because it's a CCNR restriction and not a city restriction,
City can't.
they went ahead and built a 2-story. Nothing happened because the CCNRs, they haven't created a committee to enforce it, and is something that we're going to do.
Well, we've talked about registering renters, landlords. And maybe there's something along that path. where they're to get their license or whatever it is we're going to give them, that they have to make commitments that can be enforced or they lose it. And make that license something that they value. They're not going to maintain it to this standard that's predefined. So I don't want to come in and slap a standard on something that's already built. But any new project, I think you could put a standard on. And if they don't, the code enforcement guy's on them. Worst case, city's doing it and leaning the project. You know, same as another code enforcement issue. And I hate getting heavy handed, but
Well, so you make the CCNRs part of the code.
yeah, that agreement that they sign has all those requirements in it. And I don't necessarily care about the CCNRs and enforcing CCNRs. Requirements I care about are in the agreement you made with the city. That is enforceable by regulation and fine or something like that. I don't know. I'm just,
Yeah.
And I,
stuff
and I
on
don't
that.
think we're talking your one-off rentals here and there. I'm really talking about a large massing of a project because that's where the concern is.
Yeah, it is.
So could we make development agreements required for those sorts of projects? Because right now it says may in our code. Like, you don't have to do a development
I
agreement.
think you could make a development agreement. You could require a development agreement on any planned development.
In a PD zone, it would be applicable.
Absolutely, you could.
On these projects,
Or all
would all
PDs.
be PD zone. So
We don't.
as a city, we've got the ability to really just, I mean, our short-term rental is a really good start because it comes in and it talks about the, you know, apartments and that. It talks about parking's a big thing about management is a big part of it. And then we get into the architecture and part of that. I think, you know, and then it's just how do you incorporate, okay, then if you want a development agreement with it, but we're going to have that flexibility as a city. It would just be, I love where Lena was on that because I think we could clearly spell out and something we could go in, have a discussion on and really just clearly go, okay, this is, because it's not going to be the end of it. There's going to be pressure to do this, and it's not going to stop if we just say, no, we're not open to it, because I just think things are moving that way. And so we if we get out in front of it, similar to our short-term rental, I think as a city, those before me got out in front of it and really have done a nice job in how to get that. So
I think we'll start there and maybe you trim back the amenities.
Well, I think what you're saying is really important about getting out in front of it. My mother's visiting us right now. She lives in a place called Podunk, Texas. And so we were up in Salt Lake and I took her to Daybreak. I said, this is what everything's going to look like down the road. You know, they're going to have these big, tall buildings. You're going to have all these, you know, open spaces and mixed use and commercial and all this business all kind of jammed together. So for us to just think that nobody's going to come in and want a rental community is very naive of us and very short-sighted, because it is going to happen.
We already have two of them.
You probably got more than that.
Well, I just mean two
How does she
big.
feel about Daybreak?
But it's the size of the project. You have to be careful because I mean, BlackRock. or
Oh, yeah.
Blackhawk.
Oh, yeah.
You can go
Oh,
through
yeah.
all of them. And if I've been thinking about challenging the staff to tell me owner occupied versus rental citywide.
yeah, we probably don't want to know that.
You're probably right.
It's going to deflate the air out of all our.
Oh, it's-
Well, I know at Blackhawk,
Oh,
they tried to restrict theirs just as a kindness to the owner occupied individuals. They tried to restrict theirs to 30%. And they had a really hard time. They turned people away that were just investors, but they had a really hard time doing that. And if I were to venture, I guess, I'll bet both them and Tuscany are about at least 50%
But
non-owner occupied.
I bet they're.
Yeah.
And then
But they're at
throw the
least that.
neighborhoods in too.
Right.
Not just the multifamily
Right.
projects. I want to see single
Even
family projects.
even in
because
residential.
Right.
If my street's any example of what's going on citywide,
Airbnbs,
it's 40%.
Right.
not in.
And yeah, I live on an older street, but
next door.
Right. Well, in my neighborhood, it allows rentals that's capped and they monitor them really closely, but it allows them. And we're at our cap. So there's a long waiting list right now if you want to rent in my neighborhood.
In the state.
You live in,
Village, for the village people.
Young man.
Village on the
It's shot,
Heights.
it's shot to cap those. Legally,
I just wonder how, if they could enforce it, what it would cost them in legal fees to
That's right,
enforce
because
it.
I can't imagine that would ever stand up in a
50.
it just,
Have to be a civil suit.
well, yeah, and I don't think anyone's gonna probably go out and spend that much, because I know a lot of communities that, or areas that have done that.
They went in and bought this
Well,
whole place.
This has been a really good discussion. Hopefully the guys behind me have been taking notes. And planning commission will probably get charged to bring it up some of your future meetings. So
Oh, yeah.
let's go on the agenda. Water conservation discussing. Dustin. We're going to make you come up here.
Dustin, I hope you get after Brad for the water that we used down at the Little League Park the other day.
Brad has asked Christelle and myself to do a presentation about water usage and conservation. As you know, we're growing at a pretty good rate. Santa Clara grew 8%. Our water supply is being stretched to the limit. Washington County Conservancy District has projected that southern Utah has about 10 years of water left. Over the past 5 years, Santa Clara residents have consumed about 572 gallons of water per household per day. Santa Clara is working to do our part in reducing water consumption. Santa Clara owns 100% of 2 wells, 6 and 7 in Snow Canyon. Number 7 is a seasonal well. We run it during the summer. When we don't need the water, we shut that well down. And when 6 and 7 are running and we have excess water, we will sell that water to Ivans and St. George. You can see for instance, the year 1920, we used 586 million gallons from 6 and 7, or produced, and our usage was 545 million. And the excess we sold to Ivans, St. George, technically the county, was 41 million. When we don't have enough water during the summer months, we have the option to purchase through the regional pipeline. That's typically only through April and on through September. You can see that we purchased about 73 million gallons, and our excess that we sold was 41 million. Also, but it left us in a deficit of 32 million gallons. Our ultimate goal is to reduce the use in that regional pipeline as much as we can. So with our water sources, you have 6 and 7 that we own outright. We own 24% in the Snow Canyon Compact. And that, in the year 1920, we pumped about 72 million gallons used 72 million gallons from that. So between 6 and 7 in the compact, our total well usage was 617 million gallons just in the years 19 and 20, which left us, so our total usage was 691 million. Our total shortage for just those 2 years was 73 million gallons. With that being said, we look at the water rights that we have available for secondary water. We technically have 23 1/4 shares through the Santa Clara Canal Company and another 23 shares through the St. George Canal Company that we do have an agreement with the Santa Clara Canal Company that we can put that water through the Santa Clara Canal Company if we need it. So we're allotted about 60 million gallons of secondary water between all the 43 1/4 shares. Right now we have 4 facilities that we're running on secondary water. Lava Ridge Intermediate School, Canyon View Park and Little League, Gubler Park and the Swiss Memorial Park. So our most current years of 19 to 20, we used 33 million gallons of secondary water. We have 3 facilities right now that we're working on hooking up to secondary water that are right now using culinary water. One is Black Rock Park, the streetscape, and the cemetery. The cemetery actually has all the plumbing done. We just have a filtering system there that we're going to clean and do some maintenance on and turn back on. So once we switch those 3 facilities over, it's another 11 million gallons of culinary water savings that we could have using the secondary water. With the excess water that we have in secondary, you know, there's a lot left there that we need to look at any other facilities that we could hook up to secondary water, save our culinary water. And ultimately that will reduce the regional water that we have to purchase during the summer. Our conservation goals are to reduce the city's water by 7% within 5 years. That would give us about 10% savings. We would also like to maintain a quality water distribution system with up-to-date technologies, operation and maintenance practices, educate the public about importance of water conservation, continue converting schools and parks from culinary water to secondary water where feasible, and like I said, to reduce purchase amount from the regional pipeline. These are some ideas that we've looked at with community outreach. Washington County Water Conservancy District does free water checks. We've looked at incentives to give homeowners for cash back for possibly removing their sod. We've even looked at maybe the Public Works Department could remove the sod for them. We've already promoted our watering hours ordinance. We're also looking into implementing a landscape ordinance. You know, if somebody is building a new home, maybe we start a restriction where they can only have 20% of grass, front or back. Several things like that. And then we're going to put some things in the newsletter, social media. Christelle went to the Water Conservancy District with me, meeting with me on Monday, and found several ideas that we can put online, educating people about how to water their lawn, when to water their lawn. And ultimately, we would like to try to get each homeowner to save 40 gallons of water per day, right? 40 gallons per day, yeah. Any questions? Any ideas?
I have one.
I saw that sod you just planted. It better be a good one.
It's Bermuda that uses 50% water, by the way, but I'll bet I'm under 20% for the whole acre. So not 4 acres.
Tell me you're on secondary water.
There's a lot out front, not a whole lot out back. So the question I've got is, we shut down well 7. Is there a way, and this just is there a way to store during the low peak season? I mean, we've got a reuse reservoir coming in by us. Is there a way to tap that water year round, store? Obviously you have to process it, things like that. Or is there just
Credit it?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's there. We shut down that well during the low peak seasons, and yet we've got, you know, places, you know, could we store it, use it for, you know, store it even into the reuse where it could run, maintain, be used for irrigation down the road and things like that. I don't know.
When we sell the water to the Conservancy District and then we purchase it back, is the cost the same?
It's not, no.
Not even close.
So I'm sure we're selling it low and buying it high.
There's an agreement that we can only sell it at roughly what our cost is. It sits in they do it up about every year. They have to run just what our cost is. So
And we do need to raise that.
it's ballpark, it's about 40 cents per 1,000 gallons, and we're buying it back at a
$1.10.
$1.24.
yeah.
If it goes up.
So that goes to your question.
Yeah.
Can we store?
Well, and that's where like I said, I just, Mayor and I were in a meeting yesterday and they were talking about this straight reuse up there. But I mean, the biggest part of our water use is irrigation. And so it's like, man, we're shutting down on.
Well, so the issue with well 7 though is maintenance, right? That we can't run it that long because of all the sand.
That is part of the reason we choose to shut that well down, is it's been real temperamental.
Yeah.
It's been working better since you dialed the flow back though, right? Reset the bowls and dialed the flow.
You better knock on wood.
Jack
Yes.
promised me it'd work like that forever.
Well, he's not here, so.
Jack also promised me you'd maintain all his promises.
Yeah. So that, I mean, like I said, I'm not really looking for an answer. You just think, okay, the water in the West is about storage. How do you capture it when we got it, and how do you store it? And then
That reservoir, just so you all know, that's not a water district, or that's a city of St. George reservoir. They'll own every drop of water in it. So just above the city yard. But we could probably shut it down because there's 30 reasons why I could tell you not to build it there, but we probably need it there.
but it's,
If it breaks, it takes out the tank.
yeah, they're pumping reuse water right out of the,
Yeah, they'll take treated water either from the new arsenic plant at Gunlock and drop in there, or from the treatment plant, Bloomington. Pipeline they can route water all the way from Gunlock to Warner Valley.
the sewer treatment plant, right?
Yeah.
So
So they look for,
are we paying for that facility? I
Well,
mean, that's what
I have asked
Is it we-
for all these agreements, right? And I haven't found anything that gives us any right to any water we send to them.
And that was not originally the case.
I'm still looking
When
for
we,
that.
when we joined into the regional sewer line, we were to get back the water that we put in. That was to be ours.
We need to find.
I don't know where to go to get it.
I've had Chris tearing the vault apart.
Yeah, because it would have been before my time, but when we originally went into this, in fact, Washington City and Santa Clara were the two original participants along with St. George. We helped pay for the facility, and with that agreement, we were to get back the water we put in. We may have to pay the pumping costs, but the water itself, whatever we sent into the sewer, we were to get back out. And the Warner Valley, if they build that, that's all reuse water for irrigation. You've got the Toka Reservoir that was supposed to have been started in March, and our president signed a signature note to postpone all of that. But we have all the filings are all done. The permitting is all done. Just have to start it. And that's as big as Sand Hollow, that storage. But I think storage is also a key with tanks. You can, I don't want to get into old details, but we weren't having to buy water from Water Conservancy District until we needed it. And because there's a state regulation that it can't sit in the line for more than 7 days, or you have to put in another treatment plant. Well, that was released and told to us after the fact, after we'd paid for the water line being built over to here. And so we ended up having to take water when we didn't need it and pay the Conservancy District for it. But water's still the key. And I don't know, I like the idea of the conservation, that to me is huge, and we have to educate people to do that, whatever needs to be done. But, you know, in the past, we tried to do it with dollars and cents. You know, you use excess over, I think it was the initial rate that we had wasn't enough to cover our overhead. And so we had to raise the rate on the initial payments, but then you got assessed according to usage. And if you went over a certain amount, it was a significant assessment.
And it's that way. As you use more water, you
Yeah, and I think
pay a lot
Sunrise
higher
came up with a
rate.
plan.
And I think that may have to be increased again
Well,
to really encourage. It's still the cheapest thing you will buy today.
And by the way, Ben, in the northern end of the state, Bermuda is a noxious weed. And they don't allow it.
That's what's on all your baseball fields here.
Mayor, I'm going to have to leave a little bit early, but I just wanted to make a comment about that. I went to a thing that the government sponsored a few years ago called a solar decathlon, where they build these homes and they're kind of looking forward about what's going to happen. And one of the big things was that the landscaping around them were all supposed to have a lot of water conservancy considerations. And I'm just wondering if maybe we can change the way we do that on new
I think
construction.
that's what you're talking about with the landscape ordinance, right?
Yeah.
It's
And
that thing right there.
Yeah.
And then trying to incentivize existing homes to convert to that standard. You know, water district will pay you to pull out your side. I don't know how much, but that's all gonna start to happen, so.
Yeah, the landscape ordinance is being looked at the water district. There's one that they're discussing there. It's also one whether we want to go that route of what the water district comes up with, or if we want to do one of our own.
People are
The one,
still gonna want greenery. That's just natural. So maybe one of the things we ought to do is incentivize them. I mean, artificial turf my son does artificial turf. He installs it all over the valley, the whole county. But it's more expensive to put in. And so maybe one of the things we ought to do is for new development is for people who want the greenery is incentivize them by giving them you put an X amount of square feet and you get this much back as a rebate or something like that.
Yeah, that's what we were thinking about. Cash back or something.
The caps on the irrigation lines from the Water Conservancy District right now are like $60 a cap, and they cap you at $2. So they don't get much back in a rebate from the Conservancy District.
I think you're gonna see all the communities facing the same problem. We'll probably be working together with all of them on the solutions. Thanks, James.
Could I make one comment on the removing sod?
Hey. Go, Bradley.
One thing I would caution, especially in the downtown area, if you start pulling sod out of all the lawns and, encouraging conservation, you're going to start losing a lot of your mature trees. It may not happen in one day or 1 year, but over the period of 5 to 10 years, you'll probably lose the majority of your trees.
If we converted that to secondary water, would be okay.
Yeah, that would be fine. Secondary water would be great. But, if you start ripping out sod everywhere and paying people to do it, it comes with a price.
I think the downtown is set up for secondary conversion. Doesn't have enough pressure. You're the user.
Well, it's fine. You just have to size your irrigation, your pressure between 40 and 50. It's just you just have to size your system accordingly. So, and that was my thing is we go through, there's a lot of like Arrowhead Elementary. They're not on, it didn't sound like they were on it. I mean, I think the key is, again, and that's where the whole reuse reservoir and, my question really on water storage is how do we multiply the water? A reuse reservoir. How do you get 2 and 3 uses out of that water and really just stretch it? And how do you store it? And how do you get what's the most cost effective way to do it? And then the irrigation is really, I think the key. I think you could take a lot of demand off that system just by using irrigation. And You know, these schools, I don't, the high school, areas like that, I think that's a.
Why
what
is,
we're-
why is Narrowhead on irrigation? It's got irrigation around it, right?
The lines are there.
Yeah.
That's the irrigation company.
Oh, okay. Enough said. The,
And we need to make some headway with the irrigation company.
So-
too.
yeah, there's a lot of that. I mean, there's a lot of areas that are turning.
Every house on that pipeline got a lateral.
Did they?
Yeah.
They use it? Can they?
Depends on who you ask. If you're related to somebody on the board, you can get all you want. If you're just somebody, you may not get any.
If you're a Wilson, no.
If you're a Rosenberg, no.
So are we, Dustin, and I know, are we picking up these shares where available? I
That's
mean,
what I was
we're gonna
gonna-
grab
yeah.
water shares anytime we can, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And I really think that's probably a canal company. That's probably
trying.
something we need to sit down and say, look, here's the intent. And this is why, as you guys lose these fields, we need to end up,
With
so
the
it
water.
stays in Santa Clara. Otherwise it's,
Maybe even an ordinance that says that, you can't really do that with just a share. I don't know.
You can, no, but you can put an ordinance in place that every new development puts in a secondary system.
Mhm. And buys the shares to,
Well, that's how Ben's did.
yeah.
That you have to have the opportunity. So, and there is some willingness on behalf of the irrigation company to work with the city to where they convert those unused shares and they get compensated and it comes into city ownership and then we can bank them for future use. That's the one thing the canal
We're the
company
only
can't
ones
do.
that can bank them.
Yeah.
They can't.
They can't bank them.
And they're right now re-adjudicating all your irrigation companies, all the property that was in the Santa Clara fields that's been developed.
That gives them
gonna
some
come on.
motivation to
Yeah.
come
Yeah.
to the table.
It should.
well, and I've heard rumors of a couple of those fields, that they're looking at developing them. So there's gonna be, those are gonna come available sooner than later, I think. And so I just think as a understanding that
I think,
priority number one on
You
from
know,
our
the-
side,
the process that we put in place for what's the name of your subdivision?
Rome.
Is a good model. It saved the homeowner. Yeah, he's got to put in secondary system, but he saved $5,000
It's
on
cut your
his
water
impact fee.
impact fee in half. You have the second meter, but yeah, it saves you. It's significant on that. And yeah, there's a cost of the development, but again, some of those, I don't know in an apartment or townhome type thing where they're probably going to limit how much sod they're going to have anyway, if it makes sense getting into those, but
But
you might.
it's easy to do common area because they're on combined meters.
Yeah.
Mayor, what about leasing water from the water company? Is that a possibility? Because some of these old timers are not going to want to sell the water because water has been important in this valley forever, but they might want to lease it rather than lose it.
Leasing it would probably provide wet water for the system, but it won't provide, like I can't tell a property owner where the city's gonna commit to provide you irrigation water in perpetuity like the water district wants with a leased share.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unless that's a perpetual lease, which there'd be no advantage for the share.
Well, some of the people might want to rather lease it than sell it. They might lose it if they don't do something with it. They might not be able to prove up on their water.
I mean, we could lease water to apply to a project and it just builds into our cost, but you wouldn't get that impact fee advantage tied along with it because it's not a permanent. Water district will only give the impact fee credit to a municipality. They won't give it to a private water company.
So Wendell, what if, and again, I'm not water share owner or as these, what would be from an individual that's had 4 water shares and then they develop their land, what would be the reason they wouldn't want to get rid of those outside of just the fact
Just
that,
the old time thinking of some of these people in the valley. You don't want to ever sell your water shares because you never know, you might need it down the road, but they might be willing to lease it.
Marv, let me ask a question because I still believe that in 2005, the city of St. George bought all the Santa Clara Canal Company water on a 50-year lease, and that they will be taking it over at the end of 50 years, and whatever water comes back to Santa Clara will only be given on the reuse line. There will be no irrigation shares, no irrigation company. Did that happen?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not familiar
I've
with,
never heard that, but
yeah, I'm not familiar with the details of that either.
I read just about every agreement we have and even called Bart Smith and got our total number of shares from him.
Well, it's not an agreement with
It's
us.
agreement with St. George.
The agreement was with City of St. George and the Santa Clara Canal Company.
I never read that.
I'm trying to get Dustin voted in as a board member.
That would be good.
I don't know if we'll be successful. If anybody's voting,
What do we have?
we could really,
What's our share?
how much do we have?
Proportion.
23 shares.
23 and a half. Or
Out of how many?
Out of how many?
We have 23 and I think a quarter share.
Out of how many total?
Oh, out of how many total? I don't know.
Percentages of?
We're one of the larger ones, but I don't know what the number is.
What are you
Just like
asking?
Jack? Our shares in the canal company and how big is our percentage of ownership of the total shares?
Oh, I don't know what that is. I mean, we have 23 and a quarter just through Santa Clara and then 23 from St. George.
Yeah,
Find out how many total in both. What percentage ownership do we have?
we don't have, it's not very much. We bought the 23 shares just in the last 3 years, but the 23 shares from St. George we got from McDermott's. And I mean, it's not a significant number. It would be less than, I would think, 3 or 4%, maybe less.
I think we're gonna have to like quadruple the maintenance fees until they put us on the board.
I think that would, well, at least make them pay a franchise fee.
Yeah. They say they have a counter to the franchise fee argument that I've thrown at them a couple of times.
I've never
but I've
seen
never
it.
seen the counter.
We've
We're gonna have to play that hand. So, yeah, there's work to be done. There's work happening.
Yeah.
There's more work to be done.
This is my, what's the word I'm looking for?
Just what you can do when you retire.
This is, no. But it is my passion to some degree, and I've been involved with it for years and years. And on the positive side, I mean, we started working for Santa Clara in '94, and the first water master plan we did, if I recall correctly, it was like 890 gallons per day per resident. You just showed 560,
72.
572. That's a pretty good. It's a pretty good reduction in 25 years.
Well, you figure that the Washington County Water Conservancy District's mandate from the state was to cut 30%. We're the only county in the state that has reduced our usage by 30%.
Yeah.
That number will go down too when these town-owned projects that are approved
They
are
will.
occupied.
Yeah.
The usage for those is going to be a lot less than single family.
Yeah.
That number will come down.
The other thing that probably shouldn't go on record, but is back in the day when we were involved talking with the Conservancy District, and they were saying, hey, you got to join because we can provide you cheaper money and cheaper water. And then it seems to me like they folded to the Sierra Club type people that says, hey, you can't subsidize the water. And they folded to that. And now you're paying $1.10. They were throwing around 35 cents a thousand at the time.
Well, and what we were doing, we were actually pooling the water resources. What ended up happening was we built the infrastructure.
Yeah.
There was no pooling of resource, and that was to be so that everybody got the same rate. Every city was charged the same rate. And the big brothers in the group cut the little brothers out and changed the agreement.
Yeah.
And then force the little brothers to sign.
Mhm. But we're sort of beholden to them. And so everything we can do to save or reuse
That helps
is
us.
Washington City just went up into the reserve because they had already had a grandfathered deal in the reserve to punch wells. They went up and they knew that there was a bad well producing area, but they said we can punch 7 wells at 100 gallons per minute, and we'll get 700 gallons per minute that we don't have to buy from the. And so they're in the process of doing that right now. It's just every little bit.
Yeah. But if they find that its arsenic level is over 10%, they're going to have to treat it.
They already had one up there. They knew what the arsenic level was. So
Well, they've got, again, you can use it for irrigation. You can put it to
Yes.
golf courses. You can put it to parks, put it to areas where,
So St. George City was talking about that might be just what they do before they built the arsenic plant. They would just put it in the irrigation, but with the arsenic plant, they ought to just use it for culinary.
Yeah. Eventually that'll happen. They didn't build that arsenic plant for irrigation.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you guys. Quickly, public transit discussion brought.
Yes. So let me get this. Up and going. So Matt Entz, the city attorney, sent this letter over that he received from the county on public transit. It's an agreement that Washington County right now with the local option sales tax that was implemented about 2 years ago. In the agreement from the state, how the tax was divvied up was 40% would go to the municipality where the tax was collected. 40% would go to transit if you had transit in the municipality, and the remaining 20% would go to the county. If you don't have public transit within your community, then it would go to the county if they had with public transportation. So since we don't have public transportation here in Santa Clara, we do not participate in SunTran. Currently, our 40% for public transit is going to the county, which right now we're projected this year to, if for our 40% of our local option sales tax, about 125,000. So that's what the county would be collecting of our portion. So the county had sent over this agreement that really it has everything to do with the new SunTran line from St. George to Zion National Park. And they're asking Santa Clara City to agree that for the period of 10 years that we will not implement public transit within Santa Clara so they can have those funds to help fund the line from St. George to Zion National Park.
I've got a counter agreement. We need the county to commit to our shooting range. I'm not saying on the SunTran, but let's get something back from them on the shooting range.
Well, it didn't, let alone that they're already collecting the 125,000. They're getting
What
the.
we're talking about with affordable housing and everything else is we're going to be doing public transportation a lot sooner than 10 years.
Maybe if we put an agreement that they will take on our affordable housing load.
Give us the county.
So that really
How soon are we looking, really? I mean,
on,
because I don't want to add a line just to say, hey, we're adding a line.
We can say no.
Well, I know, but
which would be, I don't know what.
We could pass an
entails-
ordinance like Washington did where basically you tell them we're in the process of creating our own, stay away from our money.
Yeah. And really,
We can't get that money until we have it in place.
Yeah.
So we'd have to figure out a mechanism to get it in place.
But I mean, the mechanism is there if we wanted to add on to the SunTran.
If St. George will add it on, if St.
Yeah,
George
is
will
that
work with
really
us.
there?
Right.
We've been
And
asking
they're the
for a
ones
while.
that want the money because they're providing the service for the county to Zion.
Yeah, so the money, the county's really gonna, whatever they collect, the county's just cutting a check and sending it to St. George to pay for the operation.
I
and
think
maintenance of that
Suntram ought
line.
to be called Greater Zion. And then we can use it for the whole county.
The second, I mean, this is not something that I want on any agenda because I don't think we're ready to approve this. Am I right? Anybody in favor of signing this thing tonight? Okay. Then I think we need to talk about what are we going to do for public transit? Because there may be some things that we can do separate from Suntrans and meet the definition of public transit, like a city-owned bus that does service for handicap or elderly within the community.
Or even maybe a St. George shuttle,
Something,
Go to a shuttle company.
some type of alternative. Right now, Suntrans, we have a bus stop in Santa Clara right now. They drive down our main drag. I don't think, I've talked to Cameron Cutler a couple of times about it, and I got to be real honest with him. So you could put 5 stops in Santa Clara. I don't think you get 5 people to ride the bus with our community the way it is today. Now, give us a few years when these townhome apartment projects open in the Heights, you may generate some ridership up there. But if you think about, if you're going to go to work and you're going to ride the bus, how early do you have to leave? And what time are you going to get home? And you might as well live in Oakland.
To get on the bus here and then drive through Ivans and head all the way around.
It's
Yeah.
it's still way more convenient for a Santa Clara resident that all have cars anyway to drive. And I don't see they're gonna do the bus, but there may be a need in our community with some of our residents to have the ability for some transit assistance that would qualify for that money. That we could provide additional service to our residents with that fund. So I want to brainstorm it before I bring this to the agenda. Yeah, I wasn't happy when I got it in the mail.
I don't think we're gonna send more people to Zion's. I was up there a couple of weekends ago. And it was just elbow to elbow. I mean,
Well, and I appreciate Mayor Smith and Springdale and the issues they have in Springdale with affordable housing. And this thing can really help them by bringing people from Hurricane and Hurricane to the park on a daily basis to work in Springdale. This is a good thing for countywide, but can Santa Clara benefit in more ways than this? I think that it is. I don't like them asking us to commit for 10 years without asking us.
Well, and I think as we study the issue, we say maybe 2 years.
Yeah. It's going to take us a while to
Take
put
us a
something
while
in
to figure it
place.
out. We'll give it up for 2 years, but we're not giving it up for 10.
And I kind of fully agree with that. So I think why don't you tell us when we're going to need it?
Well, Mayor, how loosely can you define public transit? Like, could we subsidize a scooter program?
I was thinking e-bikes.
Yeah, can we do e-bike thing?
And all our trails.
Maybe you can. We'd have to go back to the legislation and research the legislation that set it up and see what qualifies.
Tell you what, you could get to work a heck of a lot quicker on an e-bike on our trail system.
Oh, yeah.
Than getting on Suntrain.
I've gotten to work on our trails. Yeah.
I mean, it's only getting better.
Let's do some research. Let's have staff do some research. I'll have the legal guys look at the
I don't think
legislation.
originally it had any ties to public transportation.
Well,
When we passed the tax, it was.
there's that one section that spells out
but I don't think
specifically
it was
to public
This
transportation.
is from like 2 years ago, right? It's pretty
Yeah.
recent.
Well, no, state.
It was a statewide.
It's a state.
The state
state
passed it and said
legislation,
the
the
county
county could
has
do
to
it.
do it
Yeah.
if they're going to get the money, and
And the county did it.
we did it.
But I would agree. I think you could provide some service to those who need it on a specific thing and then look at all other areas to improve. It's just putting a stop out here. You're right. To go say we're going to take 120 grand and put a stop here that you're going to get a couple riders a day.
Now,
if that.
I'll sign it for 20 years if they'll take that equivalent amount of money and put it into construction of the Western Corridor.
Yeah,
I just drove it down.
I would agree. I mean, there's a huge,
Light.
I'd do that in a minute. If they take that amount of money and put it on the ground to build 2 lanes to, even to Sunbrook, from here to Sunbrook. To take the load off of this. If they would do something to take the load off of this, I'd look at it. Maybe we counter. But we'll talk about it in some work meetings, discussions, and then, but nobody's in the mood to sign it right now, from what I read.
I think this is a great thing to be in.
What are the financials, Brock? Get me to the ball game by 7, buddy.
Oh,
All right, I'm actually Debbie,
Oh,
and we'll be,
is Debbie back here?
back.
Oh, Bob, you look different.
yeah, you just need the mic.
Do you mind pulling up that PDF that I?
It's there.
Oh,
Just,
okay.
I'll just ask.
And planning
Estelle to
commissioners, if you
put
guys want to stay
my
for
screen
this,
share up.
you're
there
more
for-
than welcome.
If you could, please.
If you guys want to go home to your families, you're more than welcome.
Sure. I would have taken it.
This is good training for future city council candidates, so let me remind you.
Applications 1st of June.
Thanks,
See
guys.
you guys.
Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I'll try to get you out of here, Mayor. So the first page is the third quarter comparison, third quarter this
Retired.
year to last year. And then compared to 3 months worth
Sunrise.
of budget.
Sorry, yes?
Yeah, I see that. So you'll see that we're 3% above where we want to be, or where we budgeted, which is great. Last year's miscellaneous was quite a bit larger because of the AP wireless cell tower proceeds we received.
Yeah.
And then current year, it's really low because we had to reclass the fire. So we had a fire donation that, yeah. You're not here. So that's why it looks so weird, is because we had a fire donation that hit miscellaneous, but then the invoice came through, so it backed it out.
Fire donation.
I can't remember what company,
They donated money to the fire. department.
for a specific product. I can't remember if it was supplies of some sort. So on the expenditures, we are 43% under budget, which is great. So on the quarterly comparison, we are 400,000 higher as far as we have 1.6 in revenue and 1.2 in expenses. So that's what we like to see. On the next tab is the year-to-date to March. So last year-to-date from July to March to this year-to-date, July to March. It's 9 months comparison versus to budget. So you will see license and permits were up quite a bit, which is great. Gotta love our building permits. They're ranking it in. Miscellaneous last year was up quite a bit because of the Chapel Street corridor. So this is similar because last quarter review, if you remember, this will have the same, since it's now 6 months, it's now 9 months. So it's going to be the same thing that skewed the numbers. So it's this Chapel Street corridor, Arrowhead Trail, and then we have
Swiss Days expenses, right where we want to see it.
498.
Yeah. Was that just our paper to make the motion? Is that what-
You'll see the miscellaneous number in the 2021 year to date is quite a bit high. And what happened was when we converted our accounting system from Cassell to Polaris, we had to balance our checking account. So we got an extra 80-something thousand. So that's why that's a little higher. So we're 23% above where we were expecting to be for so far for 9 months, which is awesome. And we still are 2% under on the expenditures as far as what we were planning on budget wise. So you can see that 1.1 number, 1.1 million. So we're doing pretty good this year because of the drastic budget cuts because of COVID. So that will definitely dwindle, but we're in good position. Any questions so far?
Good work. Do we applaud staff? Good work, everybody. Guys,
Yes, you do. You do.
Way to go.
Yeah. And then it just goes by, we have impact fees. You can see streets due to building permits for doing well. Parks, we of course aren't as high because we budget higher impact fees, but then they lowered. Didn't we get dropped?
Yep.
Yeah. And then expenditures, we're under budget. So, and this again is just 9 months worth of expenses compared to budget.
And in those impact fees, I'll just add those, you've got streets is roughly a bond payment on the Chapel Street Bridge. We had one interest payment. And then public safety is working on the remodel of the Rachel Drive. And then on parks, you had Swiss Memorial and Lava Flow Trail are two main parts that make up that 261.
And then we have where are we at? Sorry, I'm going by my spreadsheet. We just, in another summation, we have the revenue Q3. We just have it all Q3 versus budget, percent earned. Again, thanks to the building permits, we're up there. And then you have the expenditures. Overall, again, we're down, so that's good to see. Do you want me to go into more depth? I don't know how much detail you want. Okay. Because I know this is super exciting.
We're all in the edge of their seat.
The water fund revenue, we are a little under what we budgeted as far as revenue, 11%. And then expenditures, we're under 34%, so that's good. But we're still 456. We have more revenue than we have expenditures in the water, so that's good.
And we hope on these enterprise funds, know that we need that excess, that income. That's what we're putting away each year for our renewal and replacement to help replace our infrastructure as it ages. So, the enterprise funds are supposed to run more like a business type, but yet we're not trying to store large amounts of money, but we have quite a bit if we have to replace water lines, sewer lines, power. It's a significant cost if we have to go through and start replacing those things. So understand that number, if it's really high, may not be some might look at and say, oh, you guys are making a lot of money. Maybe we need to cut rates in those, but we need to have, money set aside because as I've talked with our directors, our growth at some point, not too long, is going to end. And then we're not going to have those impact fees. We're not going to be building new. It's going to be all about maintenance and replacing infrastructure.
And we're going vertical.
Going for vertical. Yeah,
What's
going to get a ladder truck.
What's non-operating revenue?
The non-operating revenue in the water would be,
Says sewer impact fees.
no, it would be it could be your impact fees, your interest on that, miscellaneous revenue, if there's anything miscellaneous that comes in there.
Like our PTF interest.
It would be, if you give me 1 second, I will.
I'm just curious. And operation revenue, I understand, is probably primarily interest.
So if you see here on this chart here, this is the actual general ledger. It's going to take in your gain and loss, your miscellaneous, your secondary water, and I believe your regional water surcharge about as what would be taking that, and maybe your hydrant meter use would be what would be taking up your non-operating.
I think down below Brockett has it broke down, doesn't it?
So there's your non-operating down there. He has it broken out.
So impact fees and interest primarily for your non-operating income. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So different than the Polaris is that has it broken out different than what back in with under Cassell. So,
Thank you.
which, and that would kind of fit the same for as you go forward through sewer,
The others
power,
as
and
well.
storm.
So on the sewer, we're non-operating income is quite a bit higher too. And then, so we're 9.3 above what we were planning on budget, and then we're still 3.5 under what we budgeted in expense. So we're up 74,000 in the sewer fund. Electric, we are 26% over as far as what we're anticipating on revenue. And we are over a little bit what we budgeted, but we're still in very good position with the electric funds.
Get rid of Jack and your profits go sky high.
I was putting it all together. I'm like, there's only one thing changed in this whole equation, but I wasn't going to say it. Thanks, Mayor. So
I'll add one thing on the power in there. There is when we budget with projects on power, we install, the developer pays us for the power to install it. Not always knowing, Jack, when we talked, not knowing what that's going to be. We usually have not budgeted a revenue number to try to, we're up or down because we don't know what projects and what it's going to cost. So there's revenue in there that we didn't budget for, for any of these power projects. So understand that
the subdivision.
Yeah, the
subdivision agreements.
Yeah. So we usually we budget zero, but then when Heritage Point or Desert Village comes in, they're going to pay. And so our revenue shows like this might show a little higher because we didn't ever budget not knowing what would happen that year. So.
All right. Then we have the stormwater. Again, we're doing good, thankfully, across all enterprise funds. And then enterprise revenue and expenditures. First, we have the revenue. It's divided, or it's calculated by percent. So overall, you can see that revenue we're 13% higher than budget. Expenditures were 8% under, so that's good. And then it gives a comparison of dollars. So revenue versus expenses. Am I going way too fast? Okay. So we have 1.5 higher in revenue than expenses across all funds. So that's enterprise funds. And you can see. Then we have sales tax revenue, and those, we're doing quite well on that. We're 21% higher than we were last year, estimated to be. So, saying 34% higher than last year on highway tax.
Yeah, if you look at the sales tax, I know we've talked about this, but when you look at this, you look back over through that chart and look back, I think it was February of 2019, the first time we went over $100,000 on our distribution. Then you look back from roughly the time you would say the pandemic hit, February of 2020 or May of 2020, we've been over that 100,000 mark except for the June distribution. Our growth, and that's only getting better. I looked at our distribution, our summary from the state. I remember back my first few years here and looking at what was sold in Santa Clara, what was remitted to the state would be 15 to 25,000. And about half of that was the city's remittance on the sale of power that was there. And now this last one was 77,000. I mean, that's the growth that I've seen in, say my, 12 years. And it's only getting better as we see the other commercial coming on up around Harmon. So I think it's exciting.
Very much. All right, highway tax. And we're looking to be quite a bit higher than last year. 34% is quite an increase. And then local option tax. Why did we start getting that one?
This was what we talked about with the transit, the local option sales that
To help us fix
Was-
our roads.
implemented just 2 years ago. But yeah, so that's 94 through there. Like I said, we're projecting about 125. So
And on room tax, that has jumped quite a bit. So that's nice. Thanks COVID, I guess. I don't know. We had a little bit of a lag, but definitely picked back up.
Brock, were you checking this on the transient room tax to make sure people were filing here and not somewhere else?
well, we try. It's hard. So, I know it's one that Dave Whitehead with Paradise Village. I know one that he struggles with and trying to ask, are they here? One of the last times we went and checked, which was just a few months ago, showed a lot of people showing their accounts closed. And Ditsy's made some checks in at the state that stuff's still being remitted. So we're not sure what exactly is happening. I mean, payments are still going, but it showed a lot of accounts closed. So I don't know if they're all getting under one management. If they're more going to like VRBO or Airbnb, or they shifted them all to be under like a Red Rock or Utah's Best, where we would see them all coming under each individual unit, that it's all coming under one of the property management companies. Not sure the amounts are still, as you can see, the amounts are still staying up, increasing, but I'm not sure what that happened. And we can't get a lot of information because it's personal. They won't share exactly all the information on what's happening. So
That's why I asked in the last meeting if that our new planner and economic development person could work on that and somehow formalize a way to track it.
If we put that landlord ordinance in place, they would qualify for that too.
Mhm.
You would be able to tell who would be paying that tax.
Yeah.
All right, so then we have our wrap tax. Did I skip one? Oh, room tax and then wrap tax. Which is also doing quite well and 30%, looking to be about 37% higher than last year.
Brad, speaking of the wrap tax, are we getting any closer to doing the parking lots?
But the cost estimates today. So
Good.
yes, we are moving forward with that. And we'll be bringing it to council after I review it with Brock and our finance person.
Super.
All right, and then after that, we just go on to the financials. And there's every bit of detail that you want in summation, of course. So if you guys are bored and want to fall asleep, feel free when you're trying to go to bed or something. But yeah, we're doing okay this year. Again, due to the severe budget cuts, but COVID not knowing. But
Well, a lot of that's committed back, isn't it? I mean, a lot of those
Yeah.
purchases,
yeah.
we've committed back, just haven't made the purchases.
Yeah, some of them we did with our budget amendment in January. And with that, it's really a matter of supply. It's just, things have been ordered. It's just a matter of them coming. And some of that may fall into next year, just trying to get the equipment. And as you know, as we've talked about the tentative budget, it's more than what we had this year. It's getting back to some of the things that were needed. We cut then. So, but as you see from one of the early first slides, that we're sitting right now at just over 1.1 million revenue over expenditures, and that's staff's done an amazing job of keeping their expenditures down. But this has given us an opportunity, as we've talked through, as to creating that capital projects fund and putting money away to those things and putting money in the fund balance when we need it for the future, whatever we decide to do, if it's paying down debt and doing those things. But it's good to see we still have funds coming potentially from the American Response Plan. That our projection is, close to $1,900,000 to $1 million that will be coming on that. If we can to use on infrastructure, certain needs, they still haven't got the full guidance out on that. But as a whole, excited that we're going to be able to put some money away to do some of these projects. As you know, we've got some big projects that potentially could come our way, depending on growth and also just residents on some other areas. So it'll be good to put some money away.
So Brock, on the tracking of the CARES Act revenue in that packet, I'm looking at it now.
Yes.
Looks like we haven't spent 187,000 of it yet. We have to spend that by a certain date.
Well, it is spent as of the end of March. No, we had that, but we had still infrastructure coming from commits with cameras and infrastructure coming that we hadn't been billed yet. And then what is remaining, which it'll be only about 50 or 60,000 we're doing to wages and benefits of public safety. So it's really there. It just didn't happen by the end of March.
Okay.
Invoicing came in April on the first set of the cameras. So.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, any other questions? For me, or Brock, I should say.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, quick staff reports. Dustin, anything?
The Public Works crew completed the detention basin up off of Circle Drive behind Ryan Anderson's property. They did a real nice job. It's contractor quality. If you haven't seen it, you might want to walk up and view it. Did really good job. As you know, the slurry seal is in full swing. They're supposed to be completed next Monday. They've been doing an awesome job. Haven't had any problems with them yet. We are looking at adding a extra lane on Pioneer Parkway at the Red Mountain intersection. So that'll give us a left turn lane going west on Pioneer onto Red Mountain. We're going to put another lane of asphalt there all the way up to where the curb and gutter ends at Harmon's. Right now, the Public Works Department's relocating a irrigation line over in Girls Pond Circle, and we should have that wrapped up early next week. That's about it for us.
Thanks for throwing those signs up there at the end of Benelli.
You're welcome.
Got your camera pointed at him.
We'll get it. We know who it is, and we've got it all cameraed, but I don't want to be the one going out making accusations. But if that happens again, we will nail them this time. We'll be able to see pimples on their face.
Well, also, I'll just add for Dustin, we also had a new employee start in the Public Works Department, replacing as Jack left and people moved up. We had a spot open and just then hired and filled that position. So I think he's been with us for 2 weeks. Yeah. Name's last name Justin Bush.
Here.
Okay, I don't think I reported on this last time because it happened April 13th through the 15th. Our crew went up to the Vale power plant and completed the spring maintenance items. They were up there for 3 days and they got that plant, all the maintenance completed. The lava flow job that we've been working on is pretty much complete except for one section of a pipe that SCS is going to do for TDS. Let's see, we were able to get our power line down, but there was one section of pipe that we were going to put in for a backfeed. So it was looped. We were just going to put that off until we got time to do it. And I guess TDS is wanting to get that cable in. So they hired TDS or SCS to trench that. and they're going to put our power conduit in while they're there.
Is that what they're doing right now?
Yeah. So that, I'm not for sure what our bill's going to be from SCS for that. He told me guess around maybe $1,000, $1,500, which is I think fairly cheap for trenching that much in the lava rock. Yeah, we are almost spending that much a week renting a hammer. So I let them do it. So they should be finishing up that probably next week, I hope. Then we can get that rest of that power line tore down. The garage door has shown up for the Chapel Street Orchard building. We've got a guy on our crew that used to be a framer before he became a lineman, but he's going to be out of town next week. So we're hoping to get on that as soon as he gets back and get that door put in.
They got so many good people.
What was that?
I was just saying, when you guys interview, you're like, what other things can you do?
Yeah.
Oh, I frame and do concrete. Perfect.
Yep. That's, both of our crews have got guys that
It's incredible.
the skills they have. I mean, we use the heck out of them. That's for sure. It's a great benefit to the city. So yeah. So anyway, we'll get that in as soon as he gets back. He's the one that we hired from Texas. His family is still down there, and so he's going to go down next week and start loading up some of his stuff and bringing it up. So anyway, we'll get that. And Eric today completed the fiber map on the GIS. So he's went through today and got all the fiber that we know that we have, or the conduit for the fiber. So it's on the GIS. So I don't know if you have access to that or not.
It's probably a call to Christelle, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's not a lot, and we're not for sure if a lot of it's ours or not, but I guess we can use it if it's empty. I don't know.
What else would it be?
Well, the only discussion we had, I think that Gary and I had is, and I haven't talked to him since then, was the out here in front down Santa Clara Drive, is if it was ours or, which would have been Interlinks at the time, but Interlinks has then been purchased, I believe, by TDS.
It has, yeah.
That was the only thought, but
And Jack can't remember for sure. And he said there was a set of plans for the Santa Clara the streetscape project, but I can't find it anywhere. Okay, I'll look at it. We'll see. We'll try to find out who owns that conduit. If not, that might be available.
Matt might know. Matt Entz was Interlink's attorney when that was put together.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's all I have.
he was looking for a property.
I need to
question?
give these guys a compliment. Gary got red lines back on a subdivision review to my guy via text in like a day. It takes 3 months to get comments back from St. George City right now.
Oh, it's a disaster.
3 months, and I'm getting them text in a day. If I could only work in Santa Clara, I would only work in Santa Clara. And I know there's developers out there, and a few of them whine, but there's no way anybody's even coming close to the turnaround these guys are giving on plan reviews. So I want to give them both a compliment on that. It's appreciated
Thank you.
on our side. Questions for Gary?
When is I don't know who it falls under, the road at the South Hills. When is it supposed to open back up?
I'm not sure how much longer they're planning on being. I wish Marv was still here. You might know.
The South Hills water line job?
Water line. Yeah.
They're looking to do the tie-in at the bottom of the hill into the existing asphalt of the existing water line next week. So we're hoping after that, we can open it up to the Stookie Springs, which would open it up back up to the bike trail. But, there'll be some road cleanup and things. So maybe a week after that. And then after that, they'll go from Stookie Springs up over the hill.
Bradley?
All right, well, ask Gary. Gary also has a new employee.
Oh, yes. I guess we haven't announced him yet either. Brock Hutchings, we hired from Payson City. He's a third-year step apprentice, and he'll be taking his test in September, so he can become a fourth-year apprentice. And then we have one more year after that. He's working out great employee. Eric really likes him, fitting in good with the crew, hard worker. He said he loves it down here. actually gave us a pretty good compliment. He says, I've never worked harder for a city. So compliment to Eric for keeping these guys working and keeping them busy and working him hard. So he actually appreciates that because he says it was just kind of hard going to work, not knowing what you're going to do and taking an hour and a half lunch and an hour breakfast. And he says he come down here and we just work and he loves it. So
Very cool. Thanks, Gary.
Info Weston completed the install of all the parks today, so all the parks have Wi-Fi except the cemetery and Heritage Square. Ricotta started installing cameras in the parks yesterday, so we're waiting for some more parts to come in, but we ran into a few glitches, but we've got a couple of the parks already up and running. Part of the slurry seal, Dustin included some of our trails and cemetery parking area as part of the slurry seal, so that's going to be done the week starting the 11th. Then we have Holbrook coming in on the 14th and 15th to redo the Rachel Gubler Park and restripe it, make it look like new. So Gubler Park is going to look beautiful after May 15th. That's all I have. Little League's wrapping up, and next tournament's Memorial Day.
When do you expect tabletops to go in up at Googler?
We've been discussing that, and we were getting some cost estimates. I'm still trying to find somebody that can do the A curb, but I've measured out all the material for the landscape, and Dustin's given me the numbers that he needs as far as concrete and stuff goes. So we could schedule it, anytime, I guess, based on workload. We were also discussing, and Dustin could probably add to it. We were talking about maybe adding a couple of speed bumps in there. Dustin said he could do a speed bump for about $200 in materials. So maybe just to, deter the traffic a little bit more, we'd add a couple of those in. Thank you.
Yes, so new home permits issued for fiscal year 2021, 107 is where we're at. Got 9 in plan review. Various permits, other permits 8. Various permits in plan review process, that'd be pools and different accessory building stuff, that's 5. 1 solar permit. Currently, 360 active building permits. Between April 1st and April 30th, we conducted 224 building and stormwater inspections. So the building department's busy. Between me and Fred, we're keeping up with the inspections. Planning and zoning, we're having 2 public hearings, one for the Hills at Santa Clara. They're amending a plat to combine 2 lots into 1 lot for 3 separate areas. So that'll go to Planning Commission, have a public hearing. Also, we have a project up on Pioneer Parkway called the Point Entrada Senior Living Community on 23.6 acres, generally located at Pioneer. It's presently zoned planned development residential, and the project plan consists of the property site plan and building design drawings for the building locations within the property area. That'll be going to Planning Commission after it's been vetted through TRC. Scott's been busy doing code enforcement. 18 work orders and entries have been done this month. Court case on nuisance, 2 dam inspections, 4 city facility inspections, 18 stormwater division inspections, 1 newsletter article written. Division of Water Quality Inspection came down to inspect South Hills city projects, and groundwater inspection on Hillside. Building maintenance, we're getting ready to, the parking lot's been crack sealed, and on the 15th, it'll be sealed. Also the old city office, and then the 15th is on a Saturday. So we've notified them, and it'll be seal coated and then restriped. So for any questions.
Well, I'm thinking about it, your new detention basin, make sure that gets on Scott's list for periodic inspection. But it also gets on your your insurance for a facility.
Chris, will you make note of that?
So
Okay,
in case something happens,
yeah,
they're aware of it.
okay.
Questions for Corey or staff? Anything, Brock?
Now, just a couple things. I did share this with Dustin and his crew today. I received a card from the Southern Utah Dogs, Miss Carlton. Denny might know I said that right. Got a card from her. They had through some just runoff rain and that down at behind the old city office where they do their sports park, the gravel and stuff had kind of ran and was deteriorating. So they asked if we could put some more road base and gravel in there for them. And then we did that. And they sent a nice card today thanking the crew for taking care of that in really quick, taking care of that and getting weeds and that. So with that, the other thing I'll add, the trust invited us to be part of a pilot program in training. There's 2 large training companies that are providing training, webinars and that at a free of charge. The trust is paying for it all, and they invited us to be a part of that. So we're working on that. Chris is getting that all set up through the trust. So we have, a lot of training to do. We can all different avenues. We do a lot of training just weekly with our department heads, working on that. So trying to keep things continually moving forward. That way, as we strive to always do things better, trying to get better at what we do, working with our citizens and helping making sure we're taking care of them. So a few things there. We're getting ready for budget freeze. It's coming on. Exciting time of the year for the department heads. And let the guys know they can't spend anymore. We have that, and then we'll need the audit. So. So that is what we have going right now. So,
Questions for staff, council? Okay, thanks, everybody. We are adjourned. Have a pleasant evening.
Thanks to all. This was awesome.